In this lesson, we will be taking a look at the basic functionality that you will require to use Autodesk Inventor 2008. Here on my screen, you'll notice that we have Inventor 2008 startup screen. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out of this. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is starting up a brand new drawing. There's multiple ways to do this. The first one we're going to do is we're going to come back over here and we're going to click on New. And then what will happen, we'll get the New File dialog box. In the New File dialog box, you'll see that we have different file formats. So we have IPTs, those are going to be part files. We can also work with the AutoCAD DWG file, and we'll talk more about those in preceding lessons. We also have assembly files with the IAM extension, as well as IDW files, which will be our drawing files. You'll also notice that we have other tabs up here. So Inventor works with units. So when you install Autodesk Inventor, you do have a choice on what unit to select. So in this case, I'm using millimeters as my default, but if I wanted to, I can click on the English tab, and this is where I can default to working with inches, as well as the metric tab, which would also be my defaults. If you are running Autodesk Inventor Professional, you will also have the tab like I have here, and this is going to give us some functionality, for example, with tube and pipe. So in this case, I'm going to go back to my default, and I'm going to select on Standard IPT, and go ahead and click on OK. And what it's going to do, it's going to fire up a brand new file for me. And you'll notice up on the very top menu here it says Part 2. So this is the second part file that I have created. So let's go ahead and close that off for a second. And then when I go ahead and do that, let's take a look at some other ways of starting up a new file. I can also go under the File pull-down, click on New, or Control-N. Another popular way of doing this, and very quick, is under this drop-down list right here. I can quickly go back and select Assembly, Drawing, Part, or Presentation. So when I select on Part, in this case it's going to fire up a brand new drawing based on the millimeter template file because that was my default. So now let's take a look at just the user interface. So with Autodesk Inventor, some of the terms that we're going to be using, we have the standard toolbar right across the top, and the reason we call this the standard toolbar is you'll notice the very first icons up here will be pretty much the exact same icons that you will find inside of Word and Excel, for example. Above, we also have file pull-down menus, and we'll be referring to those throughout this course. On the left-hand side, I have my browser, and this browser is basically going to be my history tree. So as I'm building up my part files, assembly files, drawing files, we can go back and see how that was created, and we can also use the browser to go back and do editing. Below here we have our panel bar. You see I can rotate that up, or not rotate, but switch that back up, and I have my different tools underneath here. Now these toolbars, as I was showing before, we can make them larger or smaller. We can also undock them, or in this case go back and move them around. In this case we'll just move the panel bar above it. Now by accident, if you happen to close off that panel, we can always get that back by going under your View pull-down menu, under Toolbars, and selecting Panel. Or another quick way is just move your cursor over the existing standard toolbar, right-click. In this case, we'll just bring up the panel, take it right back to the position that it was in. The next operation that we're going to take a look at is going to be opening files. So let's go ahead and I'm going to close this file off. So let's go ahead, in this case, I'm going to open up a file, or I could come back under the File pull-down and do Open as well, or Control-O. So in this case, it's going to bring back the same dialog box that I was working in. And this is set on the basic premise of a project, and we'll talk about projects in a later topic. So in this case, I want to open up this very first part, and as you can see, it'll actually go back and bring that into the current window here. Let's go ahead and close that off for a second. And one more time, what I'm going to do is go back and click on Open, but I want to open up multiple files. What I can do is I can select them, holding down the Control key, click on Open, And each of these files are going to be opened in their own individual window, as you can see here. Then from the window pull-down menu, we have the option to cascade them or arrange all. So if you have multiple files, of course, we can close them individually here. In this case, we will not save our changes. I can redirect or reposition that window. Or if you want to close all of them at the exact same time, come back down under the File pull-down and click on Close All. And it'll ask you if you want to save those changes to those specific files. In this case, we do not want to do that. So for demonstration purposes here, I'm going to create a new part file. And what I want to take a look at next is going to be the Save option. So first of all, in this new file, you'll now notice that it's Part 4. And very simply, I'm just going to draw in a circle. I'm going to spin this model around, look at it from a slight isometric view. And in this case, I'm going to simply extrude that back out. So the operations that I'm doing here, we will talk about much further depth in other topics. So in this case, I'm just going to extrude that back out 10 millimeters. So if I click on the Save, or go under the File pull-down, and click on Save, or Control S, I can give this a new name, and we'll just call it Test 1. And when I do that, you'll notice Test 1 is now the active file. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to just simply place in a hole. And let's go ahead and use the concentric option. Let's move the dialog box out of the way so we can see it. Let's make that hole a little bit larger. And we'll have it go all the way through. Again, we'll talk about these specific features in another topic. So you can see that the hole goes all the way through, but now in this case I want to save this off as another file name. I don't want this to be Test 1. So in this case what I'm going to do Save As, and let's give it a new name. We'll call it Test 2. So just like Microsoft Word and Excel, for example, you'll now notice that Test 2 is my current file. So I'm going to make one more change here. And let's place in a fillet on that top edge, just so we have a change. So notice that Test 2 is still my current file. If I go under the File pull-down menu, I'm going to use the tool called Save Copy As. And what Save Copy As is going to do, it's going to be something a little bit different than what you may be used to. So I'm going to call this Test 3. Click on Save. And you'll notice that up here it still says Test 2. So I'm going to close this file without saving. Now let's go ahead and open all three of our files. And let's go back up. And I'm just going to go up one directory where I had those test files placed. And I'm going to open up all three files. So you notice that obviously all three were saved off to the hard drive. Now as they open into their individual windows, let's examine exactly what we have here. So let's go back and open up Test 1 first. So as I spin this around, you'll notice no hole and the fillet does not exist. For Test 2, just a hole and no fillet. Close that. And for our Test 3 part, I have the hole as well as the fillet. So the last thing I want to talk about in this specific topic here, a little bit more about the user interface. On the bottom side of the screen, we have our status bar. So as I start selecting on a specific tool, so in this case I'm going to make this my active sketch. I'm just going to start up the line tool. As you can see on the status bar, what's actually being shown here is a prompt telling me exactly what to do. And that status bar information will change with the specific tool that you are selecting. Also notice now on the bottom right hand side it's giving me some information again about the tool that I'm in this case. It's some information about that line. I'm going to just right click done here for a second. The other information that we're going to get while in a sketch, it's going to tell me how many more dimensions are required for that specific sketch to be fully constrained, in this case 6. But now I also have some numbers down here. The first one is going to tell me the number of total occurrences in the active document. So in this case I only have a single part, but if I had an assembly that number is going to be much higher. And the number to the right here is going to be the number of open documents. So if I had 3 or 4 other windows open, it would be displaying that number. And to the right here we have the amount of memory used. So you can see it's green, and that's a very good thing. As we open up larger and larger assemblies, that bar is going to shift over to the right, and when it gets to the red portion of it, that's where we need to start saving off some files and closing because we're running out of RAM. So the last part that I want to talk about here is the graphics window, and that's going to be the part right in the middle of the screen. So throughout these topics we'll be referring to all of these. This concludes this topic.